Here with me is Sara. She is a fantastic young person who's committed her working days to helping the Madai Trust. I'm going to restart that.
No, you actually had it right. That was
Okay.
good.
Because I was like, wait, hold on.
No, that was perfect.
Okay. Fortunately, we can cut. Okay. I'm joined here with Sara, who is a fantastic young person who's working as a caseworker for the Madai Trust. They help and empower those who are survivors of modern slavery to rebuild their lives and find a way forward. It's a real pleasure to have you here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please tell us a little bit more about the Madai Trust.
Okay, I will try my best because I can't go on for a tangent, but the Madai Trust are known for combating modern slavery and anti-trafficking, human trafficking, and the charity is usually known for providing safe houses through the Modern Slavery Victim Care Contract. But I work for the Moving On project, and this project was set up because we saw a disconnect once identified victims, went through the statutory support systems, that there was nothing else there, and sometimes that can be really challenging for individuals who are not necessarily British citizens. A lot of the survivors that we work with are non-British nationals, and they are also going through the asylum process. So the Moving On project was set up to provide outreach support to women in their local communities, to either, if they decided they want to claim asylum or reintegrate or integrate back into society. That was sort of why our project was set up. But it was also to empower specifically women to also gain that trust back into society, because when you are subject to exploitation, you do lose that element of trust within yourself, but also within society. So that was also a key part of it. And again, we go off the 3 Ps, so it's prevent, which is we also do awareness raising, and because our charity is a first responder organisation, we also handle cases where identified victims of modern slavery and trafficking have come to us, and we take their statements, and it's called the National Referral Mechanism. We do those referrals to the Home Office to ensure that they do get that statutory support. So that's sort of an element. The prevent is in trying to prevent the actual exploitation from happening. The protect is with the Moving On project, providing that outreach support, and the pursue is the we are ABE trained, so that's achieving best evidence, so we can interview potential victims or identified victims and use those interviews for criminal cases. And we also attend we call them police raids, but it is recovery sort of operations, where we work with the police and immigration to go to potential where there's been intelligence, and we go there as sort of victim navigators to potential victims and try and support them with whatever they would need there at the scene. Sorry, that wasn't very short.
No, it's amazing. I'm really glad you explained all of that. And one thing that really stuck with me is you're trying to raise awareness of all of these things. I think that's super important, because when I first heard about you and the trust, I didn't realise that modern slavery was an issue. I didn't realise that there are people really suffering through this who need help. Are you able to shed a light on how much of an issue this is at all?
Of course. So I think there is a mass misconception within society, and especially within first world countries, that slavery ended when we had the abolition of slavery. And a lot of people only actually know slavery within the transatlantic slave trade, but they actually don't know the actual history of slavery. But they don't know that when we had the abolition of slavery, that it actually didn't go away. It actually just made it more underground, more unseen, and more sort of behind the scenes. And I think, especially working in the UK, so the statistics that the Home Office have and that we work with and that we also contribute to those statistics, is that UK nationals are the #1 victims of exploitation. And I think that itself is kind of really scary to acknowledge, especially because we are a first world country and you wouldn't anticipate that slavery is actually here with us today. And then, so yeah, so that in itself is very, very scary. We're seeing a number of NRMs, the National Referral Mechanism cases, increase. That can tell us two things. One thing, as a society, we're getting better at identifying potential victims, or secondly, modern slavery and exploitation and trafficking is increasing. And I think it's really important that us as a collective society are aware. And I think also the mass problem with modern slavery and trafficking is that because it's very unseen, it's actually very visible to the eye. So I think everyone in this room has potentially either been in contact with a potential victim of modern slavery or has used some sort of service with a potential victim. So again, I think it's really, really important to highlight that. And just with that number one statistic, that the UK nationals are the top victim base for exploitation is really scary. And it's definitely something that we need to work all towards in raising that awareness and trying to prevent it.
It is really scary. I wasn't aware of that. And with it being so under the radar, it's scary to know that these things are going on, but they could be anywhere around us. Would you be able to provide an example or two of what might constitute modern slavery?
So there are around 67 general forms of modern slavery. So we have sexual exploitation, we have forced labour, we have domestic servitude, we also have forced marriages now, we have organ harvesting. So those are just to name a few. In the UK, I'm not sure if you're aware of, but we've had a raise in forced labour, specifically for women who'd like to get their nails done, or men as well. But nail bars is on the increase. We've attended police raids of recovery operations at nail bars and also car washes as well, with the forced labour with men specifically. So those are just sort of some examples. And again, car washes. You would, if you walk by a car or if you have a car and you think, oh, you want to get your car cleaned, you wouldn't necessarily that the employee that's working there could actually be a potential victim. So that's one sort of example of how unseen but also seen it is. And as again with getting your nails done, you wouldn't think twice walking into a nail salon and getting your nails done by one of the ladies or the men, and you wouldn't think, oh my goodness, they have potentially been trafficked from a different country, are working here and working on my nails, but I'm not getting paid for it, I'm not being treated as they should be. So yeah, those are a few examples.
Yeah, that's really helpful to give us some insight to what's going on so the general public could try and help. But I'll be honest, my immediate reaction was, oh, I'm not going to a car wash then, because everyone's probably, being trafficked or this, that, and the other. So what are some sort of indicators that you'd look out for in a place like that, which might prompt someone like me to contact someone like you?
I think it's really difficult, but I think that's also part of the awareness training, is that people and the general society are aware to look for those indicators. So like the general indicators are is that you're observing someone if they're looking dishevelled, if they're looking malnourished, if there are potential bruises of like physical violence, but it's also not just about the physical aspects, it's also around the mental aspects. And a lot of time that can, even though you may not be working with that employee directly or communicating directly, are they making eye contact with you? Are they speaking to you? And if so, is there someone there that's supervising them? So one of the recovery operations that I attended was at a car wash, and there were 4 workers, and their manager was on the scene as well. And the manager was very, very not keen to have us there, which I don't blame him, but they also wouldn't let us talk to the workers. So it's where, is there someone that is potentially there that's observing them? And I know that that can be difficult when it comes to managerial, but it's also looking at body language, and it's also sort of, I think a lot of it is more of having that curiosity and reflection and always questioning And I think that's not what we do a lot of as a society. We don't question enough. And I think that can go into the realms of other injustices that we have as a society all around the world. And I think it's better to ask, it's better to question, and it's better to look for. I think you have to be observant for these sort of things because it is so in our faces, but also not. And also there's mass distrust with local authorities, with the police, and a lot of the time when we are dealing with potential victims of modern slavery and exploitation, they have this mass fear of the statutory bodies because they have been threatened that if you do report it, you'll be sent back to your home country, or if you do report it, they're not going to help you, or there's sometimes threats to their life. So I think whilst it is really difficult to spot the signs, I think being observant and being reflective and always asking questions is how we can start slowly as a society raising that awareness.
Two parts to my next question. Number one, if you're just a random person and you discover something which looks a bit fishy, what's the process for reporting it? And secondly, if you are in fact a victim of this, what can you say to that person to let them know that it's okay, you can have this sorted out?
So to answer your first question, we always state that if you ever come across a potential victim of modern slavery trafficking, please do not approach them because that could put them in more danger, because we do not know if they are being watched by their potential exploiters, so we don't know what their current situations are. What you can do is that there is always a helpline. We have the Modern Slavery and Exploitation Helpline, and you can call in your concerns there. We also have the Salvation Army Helpline, the Modern Slavery Helpline, which is also there for the public, but also for victims themselves as well. And there is Stop the Traffic. They have an app, and I always kind of promote this app because what this app does is that if you do find a situation that you think raises alarms and raises questions, you can report your concerns onto this app. So it gives you generic, what is the incident, where is this location, what is sort of dodgy in a sense. And then this app builds intelligence, which goes to the National Crime Agency, it goes to different police forces. And once there is enough intelligence, then it forces the police forces to go and investigate. So that's the answer to the first question. The second question is, I think it is really difficult for potential victims to come forward because it's not just the exploitation that is happening. There are an array of factors that are happening, and a lot of times it could be insecure immigration status that prevents a person from seeking help. So I think this comes again to society's awareness of modern slavery and exploitation, in which if an individual themselves recognises that they have been a potential victim of exploitation, it's how that potential victim can then access these services. So I think what we have done as a charity is that we are trying to get our service more out there. And we have our leaflets, which we have now been able to translate in various languages, which we try and leave at hospitals, we leave at GPs, at dentists, at schools, to just ensure that a person who potentially is going through exploitation can seek that help. But again, it's really, I think, it's not a very straightforward answer when it comes to what can a potential victim do to seek that help, because it's knowing what resources are out there for them. And I think that is also another aspect that we need to build as a charity, but also as a society, is how do we get those resources out there? And like I mentioned in my previous question, that we do have the Modern Slavery Helpline, we also have the Salvation Helpline, which they can call into, and we would always encourage that if it is a life-threatening situation, to go to the police, because they have a statutory duty to also put a person into the National Referral Mechanism.
Thank you for that, and that's really useful information for everyone listening. I feel like I've been educated a lot on something I really should have known about, and I hope everyone else feels the same if you didn't already know about this.
I hope so too.
So yeah, we've delved a lot into the trust, which is absolutely fantastic. I'd like to get to know a little bit more about your journey. What led you to joining the trust?
So I think my international background and my origins in life really shaped the person I am today and my sort of aims and goals. So I'm originally from Thailand, but I'm also adopted. And I think recently, when I say recently, probably like a few years ago, I found out that the orphanage that I came from is an orphanage that combats against sexual exploitation within Thailand and human trafficking. And that to me really sort of was very eye-opening, because I do believe that I am very lucky, and I can't thank my mum enough for that. But that was one of my motivating factors. And also, growing up in international school in Thailand, we are brought up to respect everyone in society. And I think what is really important is that exploitation is a human rights violation, and it's multiple human rights that are being violated. And I think that is something that I always wanted to make a change in. And I think a lot of where my attitude and personality aspects does come from my mom. She is an extremely strong woman, and I think I have strived to also get to that level. I don't think I'm there yet, but she is a woman that will say it how it is, but she will also point out things that are wrong within the world. And I think that is something that I want to be able to do. I think I am doing it within the charity, but that was sort of where it led me, along with my international background. And we were also, I say forced, but we were encouraged to do volunteering. We were encouraged to help hill tribes in Thailand, and I worked with the Compass Youth Education, which really works on sustainability, and we worked in trying to reduce their vulnerabilities. And it's not necessarily their vulnerabilities to exploitation, but just vulnerabilities in general. And I think that is where it's really stemmed for me.
That's amazing. And something you touched on there is a sense of gratitude that you hold for how lucky you are, and you seem to want to leverage that in order to help others. And that is a way I think everyone should be, really.
Exactly.
Yeah. Would you have anything to share to encourage people to hold gratitude? I mean, it's not valued enough in our society, I think.
I think sort of similar to what the other participants in the podcast have already stated, but I think it's really important to reflect. And I think it's really important that whilst you do have that gratification and just that gratitude, to also really realise on what your foundations are. And I think for me that has been such an important aspect for me as a person, is my foundations and how those foundations impact me and my future aspirations. And I also just think, sort of mirroring again, it is really difficult for young people to try and find that footing and that grounding, and it's not necessarily where like you would want to give up on that, but I think it's okay to take that step back and try to figure out what it is that you want, but also whilst having that appreciation to the factors around you and sort of the sort of step up in life that you've been given. I think it's really important that you do use that to your advantage, and especially if you are slightly more privileged than another person, use that privilege for a good thing rather than not using it at all. So yeah, that would sort of be my sort of takeaway with it.
Yeah, it's a great thing to share. And I'd like to delve a little more into. Oh, I forgot what I was going to say. We'll cut this bit. Hold on. I'm thinking. Oh my god, it's completely slipped me. It was a really good question.
Can I ask a question? What you think?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. When you attended the rescue operation, did you grab the lead? How were you contacted? How did it turn out?
So we work really closely with statutory bodies, so that is such as the Met. So we try to work with the Met, we work with the NCAA, and we work with the Home Office, and we work with two departments of the Home Office. So it's the single competent authority who deal with exploitation cases, and we also deal with immigration. And we have a lead, a police and justice lead. His name's Marcus. And he does all the partnershiping with the police, because the Met are very difficult to get in with. So that is how we have made those connections to attend the recovery operations. And I think as well, I just want to highlight that statutory bodies such as the Met, from my observations, there is a mass disconnect between the training and the awareness. And I think it's also the approach. So when you are dealing with potential victims, it has to be trauma informed. And I think a lot of the time when it's immigration and when it's with the police, they lack that, but I also feel like they lack that sympathy and empathy to be dealing with individuals. And similar to sort of going more the criminal justice sort of aspect, you're guilty until not proven guilty. And I think a lot of the time the Met or police officers or the Home Office don't actually have that approach. And I think that is again another barrier as to why individuals and potential identified victims do not come forward for their cases.
Thank you. That's allowed me to say. So, your job is very focused on helping others, and it's amazing what you're doing for everyone around you. But I can't imagine that it's an easy job for you personally. And I'd like to delve a little into your personal outlook on it, because despite it not being easy, I'm sure it's giving you a lot of personal gratification because your actions are aligning with your values. Could you shed any light on that?
Of course. So I definitely don't think this job is for everybody, and I think it takes a certain personality and sort of drive to do this sort of thing. There are times that I am very frustrated, but it's not so much frustrated of the work that the charity is doing, because we are working with statutory agencies, we're working with local authorities. Our project, we work within the whole 32 boroughs of London, so that's 32 different councils, and that can be very frustrating. So I think the frustrations are just showing the actual cracks and the actual sort of issues within greater society that needs work on. And I think that is where it's difficult. But the trusts that I work for are actually amazing. They really take care of their employees because there is a lot of vicarious trauma. You are dealing with daily cases of exploitation and trafficking. So it's just trying to sort of find that balance. But I also have a really supportive network outside of work, which has also been really helpful when it's coming out sort of dissociating from the job. But it's really difficult to dissociate from the job, and that is something I actually have been finding a challenge with, and I've been working with my managers and with myself internally as well, to try and sort of leave work at home, not at home, leave work at work. But again, I think the topic of modern slavery and trafficking, you can't actually leave it at work, because it's in society, and modern slavery and trafficking doesn't just stop because I leave the office at 5 p.m. It's happening every second and every moment. It's happening now. So it's just sort of trying to take my caseworker hat off, but also not taking that off enough to where if I am going for a walk in the park, that I am still questioning if something is seeming amiss. So I think it's again being disciplined with yourself. I think self-discipline is really important, but I also think as well making sure that you are looking after yourself, because I can't be the best caseworker or first responder if I'm not looking after myself. But also, again, like you said, the work is really rewarding at times, and it can be just as rewarding as getting someone the financial help that they need, or even just getting one of our clients to come to our activities. So it's again, it doesn't have to be the big things. It doesn't have to be an NRM case that's gone through and it's got a positive outcome. It can be just like the really small things that one of our clients have fed back to us, that I feel more confident, I feel more empowered, and that is, I think that's what keeps a lot of the frontline workers going.
Yeah, and I think that's speaking to a general principle which is super important for anyone who might be an entrepreneur or someone who's just working towards towards a great cause, that once you're working not for yourself, but for a cause and a vision, it's hard to just drop it. When you want to take a break, it's hard to do that. But it's important that you find a balance between keeping the cause at the center of your mind and also taking a break so that you don't burn out. And it's a difficult journey to navigate, but it seems like you're doing a good job, and there's always there's always ways you can improve.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, I'm having a lot of brain fast, so we'll cut that again. I was gonna ask something else. It's been a long day.
No worries.
Yes, I just wanted to expand one last thing on your journey from Thailand to the UK. What was that experience like for you?
That came with its own challenges. I came back in 2016, so I was 16 years old. We, for some unknown reason, moved to North Devon, which is basically in the middle of nowhere. Not great for teenagers. But my first year going into A-levels, it was really one of my challenging years. I experienced racial indifference, I would say, and that was somewhat a setback for me because it was maybe me coming out of the international bubble where everyone is accepted for who they are, everyone appreciates other people's cultures. And I think when I did come back to the UK and experience that, it was a setback for me. But I used that setback then to also challenge those views and to make a change. So I transferred to a different college and was fortunate to have the support of my mum with that. And I went to a new school in which I then decided to set up a Global Citizens Society. I decided to be a prefect. I decided to join Socrates, where we challenged philosophical debates, and those debates can be on gender, they can be on toxic masculinity, they can be on racial difference, and that although you have backsets in life, and especially that transition to the UK from Thailand was a little bit of a bumpy one to begin with, it actually really flourished and sort of maybe paved slightly my path and where I am today. And I was then able to go to a university where everyone was really friendly. I was able to meet great people, and that sort of, so it wasn't easy at the start, but I think like what a lot of the other podcasters have said, that you create that resilience to the backsets that you have, and that resilience, how you take those backsets is really how you want to challenge them and also overcome them. And I think those can be actually one of your biggest motivators.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Your story is amazing, and it actually reminds me a lot of my mum, who is also, she was born in Thailand and she moved to England when she was a child. And she's detailed some of the culture shocks and setbacks she experienced from moving here. And of course, every single year, it's not uncommon to see international students come over to the UK to study. So is there anything you can say to an international student who might be a little disappointed or they experience a culture shock to help them settle in and realize it's going to be okay?
I think, first of all, it's okay to process those negative feelings. I think if you don't process those negative feelings, you then won't know what to do with that negative feeling to put it into good. So that's my first point of advice. And then secondly, if you are facing ever direct sort of challenges that is an attack on your identity or your culture, challenge it. Why are people having those conceptions or preconceptions of you and your culture? Educate and also use it again to try and be a change agent for not just yourself, but you also represent the culture that you come from. I am very proud to be Thai, but I'm also very proud to be British. And so I want to put the Thai and British values together to promote both of them. So first, it's okay to have those, process the negative thoughts, challenge the negative thoughts as well, and turn that into good. but also teach other people your culture. I think personally Thai culture is amazing, but I also think British culture as well can have its really positive aspects. So embrace both, to be honest. If you are international, embrace all the international sides that you have, and it's okay to have that culture shock. But it's also about, if you are in another country, it's also about assimilating well, whilst not losing your own identity.
Yeah, and that's a great way to approach it. I mean, I have heard of some people having a weird misconception that, you know, you can only be from one place or you only got one identity, but in reality, that's not true. You can have different sides to your personality and your identity, which you accept and value. There are pros and there are cons to every single value system, every single culture approach. So just understanding what everything is and figuring out what are the good parts is a great way to approach it.
Yeah, be proud of who you are and where you come from, and that will really pave where you go in your future. Because again, if you're happy within yourself and if you're proud within yourself, you will go a long way to others, but also mainly yourself.
Brilliant. So finally, is there a concluding message that you might want to pass on to the listeners to do with anything we've spoken about in your research?
I would really encourage engaging with resources that we have. I think we're very lucky to have an array of resources such as access to internet, access to books. Even if you are in a better financial situation, I think use your privilege, use what you have, even if you don't have much. I think there's always ways in which you can continue to learn, because if you are continuing to learn, you can then continue to challenge the things that are not quite right within the world. And I think that's where we can sort of begin. I think please have that professional curiosity. Please always reflect, but please always ask and raise questions. And whilst I know, I think the bystander effect in London is such a serious thing, I think if you are seeing an injustice, making sure that you are safe yourself, but always calling that injustice out, because I think that is how we make a better society, and that is how we create a more moral society as well.
Thank you so much for being here. We
Thank
appreciate
you for
here.
having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Margaret, statement?
Yeah, I just chose you well.
Yeah.
I could see passion and everything. And some, I talked about the things, but time is going on. I think what you are presenting is like so useful to others, you know. I mean, everybody useful. And then this third time, I feel very deeply the importance of this podcast. You know?
I agree.
I hope everybody will get it. Thank you.
This is why it's so important to share the stories. It's okay, you can go.